We're about a week from actually moving in, and when we bought our RV, the front brake rotors were very noticeably warped. Like, still drivable, but makes you really doubt your choices in life a little bit. So we went ahead and I ordered everything as far as parts to do it on Rock Auto, which if you buy the premium stuff on Rock Auto, I tend to have good luck. I don't recommend, especially brake parts, buying the cheap stuff. But so what we're gonna need to do this, of course, you need your brake rotors. I'm putting new inner and outer bearings in. The nice thing about the rotors is they all come with the races pre-installed, so you just need the bearings. And I'm also doing new grease seals gaskets. You'll also need a 22 millimeter or 7/8 socket for your lug nuts, a 1 1/16 socket for your spindle nut. I got this here as it's a bearing tool to pump grease into your bearings. A lot of guys do the hand method, which is not very reliable. If you're really trying to get grease in your bearings, and especially working on heavy duty stuff like this, spend the $15, get one of these. You won't regret it. They're awesome, and it's a lot less messy. Also, of course, some brake cleaner, and we're gonna completely flush our brake lines with DOT4 brake fluid, which is a bit more heavy duty, much better than DOT3, especially for a big beast like this. Also, I got my big 24-volt cobalt impact, and use these to take things off, don't use them to put things on. And then I got me a little, whatever they call these, what do they call them again?
Spinny thing.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Four-way. That's
four-way, yeah.
They're nice to have, but you're not going to be able to take these off with a four-way. But it's nice when you're putting stuff on. You can spin them easy. Also got some anti-seize for the lug nuts, because nothing's worse than snapping a stud off whenever you're trying to get things loose. So anti-seize will help prevent that. Also got torque wrench, so at the very end when you're putting everything back together, you can torque things to the proper torque. Again, very important, especially when you're messing with heavy duty stuff. I mean, better safe than sorry, right? Additionally, I also got new brake pads, Ray Bestos truck and medium duty. I was thinking about getting more of the heavy duty stuff, but I mean, it's not like we're gonna be driving this thing like a semi either, so I figured medium duty, good right in the middle ground. So also you need their bottle jack and a jack stand. I already have it jacked up right now, but we'll show you over here. Again, when jacking up something super heavy, don't rely just on your jack, especially a Harbor Freight jack. So I have the 8-ton jack, and then I also put a 2 1/4 ton jack stand underneath, so if the jack does give out, I have something else catching it. Also, don't jack the vehicle up any higher than you absolutely have to. All we need is the tire just off the ground. It doesn't have to be up 12 feet. So that way, if anything does fail, we're kind of doubled up, and if it does drop, it's not dropping far. So we're gonna go ahead and zip off our lug nuts. We recently had tires done, so hopefully everything comes off pretty easy, but get started on that. Probably have to put some WD-40 on this stuff. Probably should have done this first, so if you're getting ready to do this, just go ahead and pre-soak everything in WD-40. pre-soak everything else in WD-40. Alright, so while that's soaking in WD-40, doesn't hurt to go and look at everything else, make sure everything else is in good shape. Brake lines look okay. So now, I gotta get in here, pop loose this dust cap that's holding all this on, because I gotta get in here and take the nut so all this will come off too. So let me go get a screwdriver and pop that loose real quick. Be right back. Damn. Usually those just pop off pretty easy. Usually a screwdriver does it, so I went and grabbed a bigger screwdriver, pick, and this. I was like, that might work pretty good. Put it in there just like that. And
seriously?
Yeah.
Wow.
So, leverage always helps. Alright, so now that we got that off, you can see the castle nut and all the gooey, greasy stuff in there. So we'll go in there and clean that off. Of course, they did a terrible job installing the cotter pin, so that's going to make life fun. I'll show you guys how to properly do cotter pins too, but that's not the right way. Really, you shouldn't be able to do this with your fingers, so definitely the wrong way. And they bent it all up, so it's gonna make it hard to pull out too. So get a little pick here, and we won't be reusing that. Now these should be just finger tight. You might think, well, this keeps the whole wheel together, but you'd be surprised. So we got that, and then that's a little stuff. Get our 1 1/16 socket. If my research is correct, that's the right socket, which it is. Yeah, and just that's all it takes is just a little by your hand, and that thing comes loose. That should be a washer in there. Yeah. So this is the washer and the bearing, but we'll leave that on for now until I get the brake calipers off, because that's keeping everything on now. Now we'll get to taking the brake calipers off. So we went ahead and turned the wheel to give us a little easier access to the back side of everything here. Looks like there's 2 bolts for the main carrier. I think that should be enough to get everything off, but just in case, there's also 2 slide bolts, the smaller ones. But I think all we need to do are the 2 big ones, top and bottom. So we'll find out. There we go. One loose. Yep. Okay. Yay. Okay. Now we're loose and free. This is the front bearing that dropped out. Try and keep all that stuff together. Bolt loose. Alright, so now next trick is to not drop everything. Never hurts to have a little bit of wire laying around. So I got this just electrical wire. So what we're gonna do, tie this off here. Driver time. Hump it into submission. Here we go. That wire kind of will hold everything there so I can pull this off. And that's old gross. Yay. Now the fun part. Cleaning all this nastiness up. So what we have here, this is our inner bearing, and then this here is your anti-lock brake sensor, so it's a good idea to clean that up while you're in here. And then back here is the dust seal, so that acts as a seal to prevent dust and everything from getting in from the backside. All that, as you can see, just slides right off. And get all this nasty grease. Gross. It's a good time too to inspect your spindle. This is the spindle. You want to make sure it doesn't have any obvious signs of heat damage or grooves. So if you see any kind of bluing or like grooves in it, you might want to look into getting that replaced, but this looks perfectly fine, fortunately. It all looks good. I'm gonna get my oil pan that I have. I'm gonna put it down underneath here and then spray all this down and clean it up real good. So let's grab that real quick. Okay, so we got our little drip tray set up here. That way I catch everything and not leave a big oily mess on the ground. Also got some brake cleaner, and I got me a little 1-inch little chip brush so I can kind of brush all this stuff clean while I'm spraying. Careful not to get this in your eyes. It does not feel good. Now, the nice thing about using a pan is you can dip back into the stuff and reuse it a little bit. Good time to channel your inner Bob Ross. Only since you're mechanicking, just paint angry trees. It's okay to get frustrated while doing stuff, but you have to recognize that, hey, I'm getting frustrated. Maybe it's time to step back and take a breather. So you want this spindle to be nice and clean. No dirt, no old grease. The cleaner the better. can see we got our brake sensor cleaned up good. All that nice and clean again. All right. Now we can move on to our brake caliper. This is a little more interesting, but since we have our wire holding everything in place, that'll make life a little easier. So what we want to do is just pop these out and then put new brakes in. Now how they come out is the next question. So I could have looked all this up, and I have the book just in case. So if you're ever in doubt, just go buy the Haynes Manual too. It's always good to have. I've done a lot of mechanicking in my life, so I'm fairly confident in figuring it out. And the fun thing too is if you watch me figure it out, then we can figure it out together, right? So it kind of makes it more interesting. But it looks like we have, this is the carrier, and it's a two-piece. So this is that carrier, and then this is the actual pistons, and all of this stuff works together and lets it all slide and move in unison. So I think we are going to have to take these loose to slide this whole carrier off, and the brake pads just fall right out. So we'll go ahead and get set up to do that. So this is a 1/2 inch drive, so I got one on my ratchet here. We're just gonna try and pop those loose. If we get lucky, maybe not. There we go. Give her a whack. Should just come right apart there. So now, this is your caliper. This is what does all your work. So these are your pistons. You want to check and make sure that there's no obvious signs of leaking or wetness around them, because that could indicate that you have bad brakes. But everything looks dry, everything looks good. This is from the WD-40 that I sprayed on earlier, so, but everything inside and around these rings looks nice and dry. So that's a good sign. So now, let me just kind of hang this. And my safety wire is not holding this now, so we gotta kind of prop it up here. Bring this back around. So here's the brake carrier. This is what it literally is carrying your brake pads. Brake pads don't look terrible. They're still decent. But if we're in here, might as well do it, right? So the way these usually work is you just slide them one way or another, and they'll just pop out. So let's see. Yeah, just pull it out towards you, and then it comes out. Should do the same on this side. Yeah. So, here we go. Sticking a little bit. Come on in. go. All right, so these little pieces here, they're kind of there as a, I don't know, maybe as like a retainer for one. They hold your brake pads in place, but also they're meant to allow the brake pads to slide. You can kind of see where it's moved along them a little bit. So usually your brakes will come with the new sliders, retainers, whatever you want to call them. But we'll set those to the side, kind of look everything over. You want to look for any cracks around your bolt holes. Really, you want to look for cracks anywhere, because if it's cracked, it's not going to be able to do its job, and then you're going to have a really bad day at some point. But
it sounded like you said around your buttholes.
Around my buttholes. Yeah. Make sure it's not cracked around your bolt holes, not your buttholes. It's good. I'll do just a little light cleanup around these. Yum. Okay, so now we can get our brake pads. Okay, so got brake shoes. These particular brand are Reassembling, so you can buy whatever you want, but they all look and do pretty much the same thing. So we got new slides. Comes with a little bit of silicone compound. That's for the slides, so it lets them move nice and easy. And it comes with your 2 sets of brake pads, left and right. It's one thing, if you don't ever do just your left brakes, don't ever do just your right brakes. If you do one, do both of them. Just do it. You'll appreciate yourself down the line. And last thing you want is for your one brake to work better than the other, so every time you push the brakes, the car wants to turn. That's not good. So just do them both. So we'll get this all set out here. Greasy hands do not touch. So I'm grabbing them from the side. You don't want any oil or grease on this surface, because the whole point of a brake is friction, right? And oil and grease does not do well with friction, so you want to keep those nice and clean. And it looks like these are the same for inside and outside. Some brakes are different, where you'll have a different inside pad, outside pad, but these are the exact same. So we'll get those set out and ready. Open up our slides. Got some instructions too, if you need your instructions. It's always nice. And we'll gear up for putting these back together. So I think what I'm going to go ahead and do first, it might make it a little easier on myself, is to So since we're putting new brake pads in, they're going to be a little bit thicker than our old ones, right? Not much, but just a little bit, maybe a 1/16 of an inch. So we're going to have to push our pistons back in. And they make special tools to do this, but I don't have the special tools. So you can use like a pair of channel locks. Give it a good squeeze. That seems to be doing the trick. So you're basically pushing all that fluid back in. It looks like it pushed this one out. So This might be a little tricky. I have to squeeze both of them at the same time. Yeah. So we're gonna have to squeeze both of them at the same time, it looks like. So we're back to kind of hanging here, so I'm gonna do another wire to hold that in place. Alright, so now that's hanging there good. Yeah, so take my claw hammer and just wedging that in there. That should keep it from pushing back out. Let's see what happens. Yep, that's doing it. Okay. That pushed them both in. There we go. Alright, so now we should have plenty of room in there. We'll give it a quick clean. Those seals actually look really new. That's good. Okay, so now we need to put our brakes back in the slide. Trying to remember how this goes back together. So, got a little bit of our silicone grease. They don't give you much, but all you want to do is just put a little bit behind where the sliders go on. Just a little tiny bit. Smear that on there. Smear that on there. Doesn't take much. So I can't remember which way they went on, so let's check our directions. Directions don't help much, but you can tell there's definitely a left and right. So you have some different styles. See, one's a mirror image of the other. So what it is one goes there on top, and then the other one, when you put it on, will be opposite. Right there.
So does it matter which one you put on which?
Yeah, because this brake pad will only move that far, but this is the one that actually moves more. So, and put a little bit more silicone right where those brakes will sit. Nice little smear. Up here. Okay, so now we can look at putting our new brakes in. So just kind of slot them in there, just like so. Again, careful not to touch the brake surface. Push them in enough that they kind of stay in, and then flip her back over. back in place there. I might have to snip this wire. Looks right. So get everything lined back up. We should be able to put our 2 bolts back in. Okay. Back to hang in there. Push that all the way up against so it's flat. Same with this one here. Again, careful not to touch the brake pad surface. Get everything pushed in there nice and flat, nice big gap. Well, we'll let that hang out and we'll put our rotor back on. So now we're ready for our rotor. I have all the parts we need here. Inner, outer bearings, dust seal, rotor itself, brake fluid or brake cleaner, and the grease. So basically it's backwards of how we took it off. So now we're gonna go ahead and do our dust seal, which is pretty easy. Bring it up here. That never hurts to check your old parts that you pulled off and make sure that it's the same as your new stuff. Yeah, that looks the same. And you know, you could probably get away with not doing this dust seal, but you're already in there. Why not spend a couple extra dollars and just go ahead and do it, you know? Everything nice and clean. Just pushes on there, make sure it's flat. That's it, easy. Next, inner bearing, the big one. And kind of make sure your hands are decently clean. You don't want to touch that stuff any more than you have to. And this is our bearing grease tool, which is amazing. And pull all that out. So what you do is you set your bearing down in there. Just like so. Then this sits on there like so. So it's sitting in like that, and it kind of creates a seal. And then what you want to do is you want to push until you start seeing grease come out of the top of the bearing. See that? Okay. So now see, every one of those rollers has got grease coming out now. So we know for sure that that bearing is nice and packed. Much better, much more reliable.
That tool is awesome.
And then what you want to do, just take some of your leftover grease, smear it across this side. Get it nice and lubed up. No such thing as too much lube. Yeah. That way we know our bearing is nice and loaded up. So I just slide it on. Nice and lubey. Take my hands off. Now get this heavy boy I want to make sure this is they call it it's called a race. That's where the bearing rests and spins on. So again, you want to make sure that's nice and clean. A little brake fluid, brake cleaner. Just wipe it off. Do the same on the other side.
How much do you think these things weigh?
Oh, I don't know what, like 50, 60 pounds. Heavy.
They're heavy.
Alright, so now we're ready to get this sucker. You want to be careful when you put these on. Make sure you don't hit your brake sensor. Try and just go straight on. Okay. Probably should have got everything else ready first because it's not going to stay on there very good. Or you can have your wonderful wife hold it for you. That works too. We get our other bearing. Get it in there. Do the same thing. Alright. Some greasy. Slide that up in there. Okay. Got it.
Mm-hmm.
Get our nut. And nuts. Forget your washer that was likely stuck to your old bearing. Just kind of clean all that up. That goes on there. Get our nut, clean that off. Make sure we don't have any rocks or sand in it. Go ahead and give that a quick blast. Some you just want to make sure that, like, you know, there's no major damage. Again, make sure it's not cracked or broken. This looks like it'll be okay. Start it. And there we go. Now it's staying on. So the next step will be to tighten everything up a little bit and then make sure it spins freely. Now that we got everything set up and in position, everything's centered up well. So now what we need to do is tighten our spindle bolt back up. But you don't want to make it tight. You remember, this whole assembly needs to rotate. If you tighten it too much, you squeeze those bearings too much, and then they don't want to move. Eventually they'll overheat and then explode and your wheel falls off. So the kind of rule of thumb with almost any wheel bearing is you want to get it kind of as tight as you can by hand. Sometimes it helps to kind of rotate, let everything settle into place. So snug by hand. Then you get out your ratchet, or in my case, I have my breaker bar. And just go till you get a little more resistance. Probably should put grease on that seal That seal is awful squeaky. Yeah, I don't like the way that sounds. So, you know, I put that seal on, that seal's spinning, and it's just that sound of rubber on metal. That's not good. Let's make that not squeaky. So, take everything back off. Again, do it right the first time so you don't have to do it again, you know. Take everything back loose. Should just be able to slide that out just enough. Get me a little grease. A little grease on the brush there. Let's get in there and lube that up a little bit. Yeah. That should make it not squeak. There we go. No more squeak. Bearing back on. Washer back on. Come on. Fingers are all slippery. There she goes. Turn that back on. Nice and cool.
Much better.
No squeaky. Things aren't designed to squeak. Yeah, snug this back up a little bit. So what we want to do is we want to keep slowly tightening this up. Just a little bit at a time. Until you feel some notable resistance in that. Doesn't necessarily need to free spin, but you know, it's kind of an intuition thing, but you'll know when it's too tight because all of a sudden it's going to be really hard to turn. Okay, that got a lot harder to turn there. So. Let's do a little bit more. Okay. So I kind of like where that's at, so I'm going to back it off just a little bit, maybe like 1/4 of a turn. There. Still feels good. Give it a yank, make sure there's no wiggle in play. Still feels good. Alright, now should be good for our retainer nut and cotter pin. So what you want to do, I got this little kit of assorted cotter pins. Those won't work, that's too big. So let's get those. You want to find a cotter pin that's not too big, but also not too small, just right. These are kind of fun if they could work, but I don't think I want to use those style. Let's see. It's too small. Too small. I think we'll go with this one. It's a little big, but that's perfect. So what you want is you want your pin to be just a little bit longer than the actual nut itself. So what we'll do is we'll put this in, and then we'll just bend the long one, and it's going to bend all the way up and around the spindle. So let's do that. Make sure we know where our cotter pin goes through, right there on top. Take our nut and set it on there. Okay, all lines up. Drop our pin in. Just like so. Now with the pair of needle nose, you just grab the long one. A lot of people like to bend them around this way. They're not designed to be done that way. They're designed to reach up and over, like so. So that'll keep it in its position without it flopping around too much. So push that in a little bit. So this one's a little long, so it's okay, you can go in. Clip that short. Now that's in, it won't spin around. It'll hold itself in place and not come out. And then you only have one thing. It's easy to get to in the future. You just bend it straight back down versus bending both of them. Much more simple. Now we got our dust cap again. The grease doesn't look too bad. I'll just kind of smear that grease back around. Clean her off a little bit. These are always a pain in the butt. Just kind of get it flat in there as best you can. And then you just got to give it some love taps. Just like that. You can hear once it's seated, you know, the hammer, it sounds different. So that's it. We got a new brake rotor installed, guys and gals, whoever might be watching. So now what we want to do before we put the brakes back on, we want to make sure all this is nice and clean, because it has a coating on it from the factory that keeps it from rusting, but also just in case you touched it and stuff. So get you a nice clean rag, no grease on it. Give it a spray brake cleaner. Just go and wipe all that off. And do the same on the back. You can get to it from there and just give it a spin. Sorry. Okay, so that's nice and clean now. Alright. Now we get to put our brake caliper back on. So if you're ever considering doing your own work on your own vehicles, spend the money, buy a Haynes Manual. Chilton's even better, but Haynes bought Chilton and then absorbed them. Now it's just Haynes mostly. For older stuff, you can find a Chilton's, which are really good. But this pretty much tells you how to do most everything you need to do maintenance-wise on your vehicle. It also gives you torque specifications, in some cases wiring diagrams, just all kinds of good information. So before you even think about doing something buy one. Just get it. Have it in your car at all times, just in case something happens. You have this. It's always good to have. Totally worth the money. So we're gearing up, put the brakes back on to the spindle, and I'm just checking in the book for the torque specifications. For the smaller bolts, they're rated for 16 to 30 foot-pounds, but for the big bolts, it's showing 195 foot-pounds, but my torque wrench only goes up to 150. So basically, I'm gonna get it to 150, and then I'm gonna go tighter than that, so it should be fine. So as we're putting some of this stuff back together, we put some anti-seize on these bolts. This will ensure that in the future they come off. We don't want them to come off while we're driving, but we want them to come off next time we have to do maintenance, right? So usually put just a nice thin, you don't need to like go crazy with it, just a thin coating like you're painting it on. This will ensure that these threads don't rust up and get stuck in place. So get that there. This one here. Nice good coating. That's there. Okay, now I get to muscle all this back into position. So first we gotta make sure our brake pads fit over the caliper or the rotor. Encouragement. There we go. Slides into place. Make it a little easier on myself. Do the top bolt first, so I don't have to sit there and hold it while I try and get the bottom one. Nice and finger tight. Now we should be able to do the bottom one pretty easy. Again, make sure to try not to touch your brake shoes and your rotor. Sometimes it helps to wiggle everything around so you can easily spin the bolt. Okay. You always want to start things by hand, get them as tight as you can, because that'll let you know if you're cross-threaded or if there's dirt in there that makes it feel grainy when you're trying to screw it in. I am kind of against power tools for the most part, unless you're actually just taking stuff apart. It's great for taking stuff apart, because if it's rusted together, yeah, get that impact out and just get it apart, you know. But they have a tendency when putting this stuff back together, you'll over tighten, cross thread things, or you'll just completely break a bolt, which is never good. When you're already apart and you're trying to put it back together, last thing you want to do is break something, because then it turns into a nightmare. So try to use hand tools as much as possible. It's a general rule of thumb. If you can't break it loose by hand, you might have to step up to a more powerful tool, but just save yourself the headache. A broken bolt is never fun. They're really frustrating. It takes a good day and turns it into a bad day. So now we're all finger tight, so I can go in. I want to make sure I don't forget these two smaller bolts that I tightened up a little earlier. These were the ones that are rated for 17 to 30 foot-pounds. So I'm just gonna go ahead and get them a little snugger by hand. Find the other one there. And take our torque wrench, set it to, so I don't know why it says 17 to 30, so I'm just gonna kind of go in the middle. So that's 24 foot-pounds, sounds good. Okay, so we got it set to 24 foot-pounds. So what we're gonna do, click. Click. Honestly, that doesn't, I might go up to, yeah. Let's go all the way up to 30. It just doesn't feel very tight. You gotta trust your intuition sometimes. Quick, and just double check. So that one went a little tighter. Good. Good. All right. So that's that one. Now we have the big one, which is gonna crank this all the way up to max. At least we'll know it's at least 150. Let's see, I don't know if I can get this in here. I only weigh
165?
60 pounds.
Yeah,
so.
60. 160.
With leverage.
You can give it an extra 10.
I don't know if I can make that any tighter. Yeah. Should be fine.
Yeah.
I wish I knew for sure, but it's best as I can do. And I don't want to put the impact on it because I don't want to over tighten it. So should be good. And now clip off wires. Make sure I'm going to reuse these for the other side. But that pretty much is how you do your brakes on a 2001 Ford E450 chassis RV. It should work for any of the 450 and probably the 350 chassis, but it's all pretty much the same thing. Just remember to take your time, use the internet to your advantage. find YouTube videos like this one, or other sources, forums, all that stuff. But that pretty much takes care of it. You can go back through and make sure all your brake lines are still looking good, nothing's pinched, everything rotates smooth, feels good. That pretty much sums it up. So hope this helped you out. Again, just take your time, be patient, buy the book, try and do everything by the book. Don't use power tools unless you have to, and just have fun with it. Don't make it any harder than it already is. Just take your time, go take a break if you get stressed out or if you get confused. If you have questions, I mean, ask friends, family, shoot me a message on Facebook or on YouTube or wherever, and rely on the help of others, because I mean, none of us learned to do this by ourselves. We all learned from somebody, somehow, somewhere. So good luck, and we'll see you guys next time.